Welcome back, everyone. This is going to be my full Godzilla vs. Kong breakdown and Easter eggs. There were some Easter eggs for where they're probably going to be taking the sequels because they just announced that it's one of the most successful releases that they've ever had on HBO Max. I think it's actually the current record holder, but it's also crushing it at the box office considering everything that's happening with movies right now. So I think it's a foregone conclusion that Legendary will eventually renew their license with Toho and we'll see more Godzilla, more Kong, more MonsterVerse movies. Careful for spoilers if you have not seen the movie yet because we'll be talking about everything, but they do leave the movie on a moment with a couple Easter eggs that let you know where they're going to be taking future movies. We've also got some more information about the original post-credit scene and how that changed, so I'll talk about that too when we get to that part of the video. But we'll just start at the beginning of the movie, work our way through shot by shot, talk about Easter eggs as we go along. But they open the movie on Kong, revealing that he's being held at the Monarch facility on Skull Island instead of being allowed to roam free because they've been worried that Godzilla will come for him since the events of the first Godzilla movie a couple years ago and then King of Monsters, with everything that went down. They didn't feature Kong during that movie, but because of what happened with his war with King Ghidorah and them sort of activating all the Titans, like a new alpha surfaces, Godzilla is technically the alpha, but Kong himself is also canonized as another alpha Titan during this. But it's also implied that he was affected by what was happening between King Ghidorah and Godzilla. The very Truman Show looking Monarch facility that they're keeping him in on Skull Island just looks so huge that it probably would have taken them years to build it, so I wouldn't be surprised if they were constructing a version of this starting way back in the 1970s after the events of Kong Skull Island. But we meet the little girl, we learn about her relationship with Kong. At some point, there was a really bad storm that basically wiped out the native tribe that was living there. Kong sort of unofficially adopted her the same way Rebecca Hall's character kind of adopted her. We learn later in the movie that they've actually been speaking sign language to each other, and Kong is really, really smart this whole time, but he's been hiding his intelligence from Monarch just because he doesn't trust them. But then they have the opening credits, and there are a whole bunch of Easter eggs through these opening credits. You probably spotted at least some of them. They're done in the same style as all the other MonsterVerse movies where they have all these redacted documents that make all kinds of Godzilla, Kong, other Titan references to the classic Toho films and the way they've weaved those characters into the modern-day MonsterVerse films. They also use these montages as sort of mini recaps for the previous films, like last time on Godzilla Watch, and this is what just happened to Kong. There's redacted documents built around all the names of the key crew members, like the director, the other main actors. When they show the new director, Adam Wingard's name, it reads, "History of the Titan Wars will be explored in a film by Adam Wingard that sheds light on previous hidden truths." Then it redacts all the documents, blacking everything out. Really cool side note Easter egg, too, about this new director. If you remember Peter Jackson's King Kong movie from a long time ago, it's not canon to the new legendary MonsterVerse movies, but Peter Jackson was developing a direct sequel to that movie that would have been a bigger Skull Island movie, and he brought Adam Wingard on to direct it. So this was in the early 2000s. The studio obviously didn't like how that King Kong movie performed, so they canceled the sequel plans, but then Legendary picked up the reins and the license, and they did a Skull Island movie themselves many years later. But one of the biggest reasons why Adam Wingard was brought on to direct Godzilla vs. Kong is because at the time he was developing that Skull Island sequel movie for Peter Jackson in the early 2000s, the executive who was at the studio overseeing those projects went on to be hired by Legendary to manage their MonsterVerse franchise, so that same executive remembered his Skull Island pitch from years and years ago and thought that it was a really good idea. So that's the connection and how he wound up directing Godzilla vs. Kong. He also revealed that the cool aircraft carrier fight scene during the movie between Godzilla and Kong, they had actually planned on doing a version of that during the 2014 Godzilla movie, but had to cut the scene just because they didn't have the budget to do it at the time. Then when they get to Alexander Skarsgård's name, under his redacted documents, it says, "Needs to prove existence of Hollow Earth to salvage tarnished reputation," sort of explaining a little bit about his backstory. Then there's a reference to the events of Kong Skull Island with a picture of Bill Randa's 1973 expedition, John Goodman's character. Towards the end of the opening credits, they show a whole bunch of monster stats for the other kaiju we've seen in the MonsterVerse films, the female Mutos from the 2014 movie, the Skull Crawlers from Skull Island, Ghidorah's stats from King of Monsters, And even though they killed off Mothra during that movie, there's a reference during this movie, during Godzilla vs. Kong, to a Mothra egg. So there are a lot of people that have theories that Godzilla somehow fertilized Mothra's egg and they'll hatch another Mothra child at some point in the future MonsterVerse films. There was also this weird joke during King of Monsters about how Titans reproduce. Like, all right, we'll play the Titan reproduction reel while they're in the middle of that Senate hearing. Then we get the opening scene with the Titan Truth podcast, Brian Tyree Henry's character's conspiracy podcast. The logo for his podcast with the Godzilla eyeball looks eerily similar to the poster for the 1998 Godzilla movie. He explains a little about his backstory, how he tried to infiltrate Apex for the past couple of years. He's an engineer, so he is genuinely a smart person, even though he's this kind of crackpot character with all these crazy theories that somehow turn out to be right at the end of the day. We'll talk about that too, because at the end of the movie, he sort of teases Kyle Chandler's character coming onto his podcast to talk about aliens and extraterrestrials. That's a whole idea for the space kaiju from the classic Toho film, so I'll talk about that when we get to that part of the movie. For those of you that want Space Godzilla, Gigan, or some of the other space titans to show up, he winds up infiltrating the lower levels of the Apex facility to find out that they've been engineering Mechagodzilla's eyeball. He doesn't know exactly what it is at the time, but that's what it is. It's one of his eyeballs. And we get that opening Godzilla attack, which is meant to be a big reference to the Jaws movie. So the way they open with him coming in through the bay is meant to directly reference Jaws, especially the way he comes out of the water. They sort of set up the idea that he's going around the world attacking all these Apex bases. We also meet Serizawa Jr., Serizawa's son, in Walter Simmons. The company is sort of this glorified amalgam of a bunch of real-world tech companies, and he's sort of meant to be an Elon Musk-type figure who's developing all these innovations. Secretly, we find out that's because he's been harvesting a lot of Titan DNA and using it to make all these tech advancements. But it's all in service of creating Mechagodzilla. The whole thing with Serizawa's son, the way they tease his motivation, I guess, is the idea that he wants revenge against the Titans for the death of his father, even though technically his father, Serizawa in King of Monsters, sacrificed himself because he loved Godzilla so much. He loved all the Titans and thought that they were actually good for the Earth. It kind of seemed like they killed him off at the end of the movie, but we didn't see his body get melted down. It just seems like his brain got fried because of that connection. But the reason why Simmons named the company Apex is because he wanted humans to become the true apex of life on planet Earth again, not the Titans. Then we're reunited with Millie Bobby Brown's character from the previous film, who's in high school now, full-blown Titan conspiracy theorist, bit of a red flag there, listening to Bernie Hayes' podcast like she's addicted to it. There was an actual funny tweet from Elon Musk himself, like I just made those Elon Musk references, where he said the movie is sort of a love letter to conspiracy theorists, which isn't necessarily a compliment. Even though overall I did like the movie for what it was, like it delivered on the promise of this giant kaiju fight. Her character is one of the early people to sort of learn that Godzilla is being provoked, attacking all these Apex bases. Her father, Kyle Chandler's character, still working for Monarch. He explains that Monarch's whole long-term plan is to use Godzilla as the Apex Titan, the king of all Titans, to develop a lasting, peaceful coexistence between all the Titans around the planet and humanity. We meet Julian Dennison's character, who seems like he's just one of Millie Bobby Brown's friends from school, who she ropes in because 1, he has access to his brother's van, and 2, a driver's license. This sort of seems like his level of usefulness during the movie, even though he's also the one at the end of the movie who just splashes all the whiskey on the controls. But then we check in with Alexander Skarsgård's character, Nathan Lind, and learn about his backstory. He used to work with Monarch and his brother trying to gain access to the Hollow Earth. He's sort of the expert on Hollow Earth during the movie, which is why he's there, especially at the end of the movie when they go back to start studying it in earnest and all the other new Titans that they discover down there. We learned that he left Monarch, though, when his brother got squashed like a pancake because of the big twist, how you enter through the portal to get to the Hollow Earth. They tease this unlimited energy source that they kind of explain later in the movie, but they do a lot of hand-waving. They don't fully explain what's going on with it, only that it's this unlimited source of clean energy that's also responsible for the original creation of the Titans, like this sort of radioactive energy source that caused all these animals, these prehistoric monsters, to grow so large. Obviously, they want to use that energy source secretly to power Mechagodzilla systems. The actual university that he works at, though, Denham University, I believe is named after Carl Denham, one of the characters from the original King Kong movie, who was also featured during Peter Jackson's 2005 remake. The way they visualize the Hollow Earth 2 is a little bit like Journey to the Center of the Earth, like this prehistoric land of dinosaurs living underneath the planet's surface. Nathan Lynn's character goes back to Skull Island to get Eileen Andrews' help in getting Kong to lead them to the Hollow Earth, thinking that he's going to be the key. The chains that they put him in are also meant to be a reference to the 1933 original King Kong movie, the chains that they put him in during that film. They introduce Izzy Gonzalez's character. She's Simmons' daughter to sort of babysit their enterprise and steal the energy source once they get down to the Hollow Earth. She serves as sort of like a throwaway villain during the film. But of course we get Godzilla vs. Kong Round 1. So this whole aircraft carrier battle is meant to be a reference to the classic 1960s King Kong vs. Godzilla film. Obviously there's a lot of references to that film during this film. Like at the end of the movie when he shoves his axe down Kong's throat, that's meant to be a reference to him shoving the tree branch down his throat during the classic film. They also end the movie in a similar way to they ended the 1960s King Kong vs. Godzilla film, with them both going their separate ways. Also, their backup plan for getting him to the Arctic after they destroy most of the aircraft carriers, carrying him in the nets with the helicopters, is meant to be a direct reference to King Kong vs. Godzilla, where they do pretty much the exact same thing. Millie Bobby Brown and Julian Dennison's character track down Bernie Hayes because apparently he buys so much bleach. They set up the twist with the flask of whiskey with his wife's ashes in it for later in the film pouring it on the controls to short out Mechagodzilla's systems. They break into another local Apex base, find the Skullcrawler eggs, and learn that Apex has been cloning and growing their own titans to test Mechagodzilla. Simmons also says release number 10, so the Skullcrawlers are just one of many different types of titans that they've been using to test Mechagodzilla. The whole idea of humans creating their own titans or growing biological titans is also a reference to a couple different kaiju from the classic Toho films. There's Destoroyah, who's sort of like the Thanos of the MonsterVerse movies, and Biollante. So just the idea that humans are messing and combining Titan DNA could lead to those Titans showing up in future movies. When they actually get to the Monarch base in the Antarctic with the entrance to the Hollow Earth, they tease the idea that maybe some of Kong's family might still be down inside there. I think potentially they're leaving that idea for future films, but you do see a lot of artifacts and monuments to Kong's ancestors down there. You see all this massive infrastructure and these tunnels going down to the Hollow Earth, so it seems like Monarch has been developing this for a long time, but the way they visualize the actual portal and traveling to the Hollow Earth is meant to be a reference to 2001 Space Odyssey, where it's almost like you're evolving into the Star Child by traveling into the Hollow Earth. The danger they explain is that there's big gravity inversion, so you get squashed like a pancake unless you have a way to counteract the gravity effects, but it's also a way to explain how humans have not traveled to the Hollow Earth before now. But there's so many structures down in the Hollow Earth that seem like they were created by prehistoric humans or ancient races that worship the Titans. They explain a little of this during King of Monsters as well, these ancient races that worship them like gods. They tease that there are tons of lesser titans just flying all over the place down here that they haven't completely explained. The only ones they've officially explained are the war bats that Kong winds up fighting here, then taking down, and then later the bat titans inside the temple. The rest are all sort of speculation as to who they'll wind up being. Some of them do look like newer versions of classic Toho titans, but that just remains to be seen in potential future sequels down here in the Hollow Earth. He finds the ancient axe weapon that looks like it's built from one of Godzilla's ancestors' dorsal spikes in a Muto bone, then learns that he can charge it using the radioactive energy from the planet's core inside this specially designed Godzilla mural. So if you wonder why there's this Godzilla design that lights up that's wrapped around this giant Kong throne, that's because the ancient humans that worship Kong's ancestors were just paying reference to that relationship. But then Millie Bobby Brown and Team Conspiracy wind up in Mechagodzilla's holding facility and they learn what they've been doing with him this whole time. So they've been using these other titans they grow to test his systems, and they've stolen at least one of Ghidorah's heads and are using it and his brain material, his brain matter, as a living supercomputer that allows them to basically remote pilot Mechagodzilla like a Pacific Rim Jaeger. Which is funny because Legendary also made the Pacific Rim movies. It sort of creates this mental link with the AI that they use inside Mechagodzilla's body to control him. Once they wind up stealing and replicating the energy source to fully power up Mechagodzilla the way they want to, though, it somehow shorts out the connection with their control systems. And even though they don't fully explain what's going on here, they just kind of hand wave over a lot of it. A lot of people believe that it's actually the remnants of Ghidorah's psychic energy combining with the AI inside Mechagodzilla's body that goes rogue after the energy source shorts out the connection. So it's also a bit of a reference to Mecha Ghidorah, which is also one of the titans from the classic Toho films. But Mecha Ghidorah looks very different, has a very different origin story. A lot of people are also thinking that this version of Mechagodzilla is more similar to Kiryu because that was actually a Mechagodzilla cyborg built around the bones of the original Godzilla. and this version of Mechagodzilla does incorporate some organic parts and abilities from Ghidorah. There are many different mecha versions of the Titans in the classic Toho films. Also, when it winds up taking out the Alpha Skullcrawler with its beam weapon, that's also meant to be a direct reference to the first MonsterVerse Godzilla movie where Godzilla takes out the Muto using what they're calling his kiss of death, so to speak, with his atomic breath. Only now, it's Mechagodzilla giving his version of the kiss of death. But anytime they power up Mechagodzilla's systems, Godzilla can detect him around the world, so obviously he then comes to Hong Kong. Godzilla did also attack Hong Kong during 1995's Godzilla vs. Destoroyah, for more of you hoping that they'll eventually work up to that character in the new MonsterVerse films. But when Kong winds up charging his axe, Godzilla also detects the energy source all the way down inside the hollow earth, and his atomic breath is so powerful that he blasts a hole straight down there. So obviously, even though Kong winds up in the hollow earth at the end of the movie, because Godzilla was so easily able to blast a hole down there, it'd probably be just as easy for him to travel down there as well. There's also a Godzilla roar over the ending credits scene too. I'll explain that in a second too, because it's also a reference to classic Toho films. Kong sees it as a challenge and works his way back up, and they have their first big rematch in Hong Kong, round 2. Kong's able to win round 2 because of the charged axe, but then directly after it, after the axe loses his charge, Godzilla is able to beat him down again, so that's sort of like round 3 technically goes back to Godzilla. But that's when Mechagodzilla breaks free of his containment, goes rogue, busts out of the mountain, and then fights Godzilla. So you have Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, and he winds up kicking his ass pretty bad. The whole idea is that Mechagodzilla is supposed to be way more powerful than Godzilla and Kong on their own until they team up and get the boost from the charged axe weapon. Titans teaming up to fight Mechagodzilla is also a reference to the classic Toho film. Usually it winds up being a team up to take down Mechagodzilla. They show off all of his abilities. He's got a version of atomic breath. It's been supercharged because of the new energy source from the hollow earth. His mechanical tail acts like a drill. I believe that's also meant to be a reference to classic Toho monsters. It also seems like there might be a tail laser too, but he never winds up using it. He's got a very Hadouken-like charge attack. He's got missiles all up and down his dorsal spike assembly that he gives off. He's got booster rockets all over his body, making him way more agile than Godzilla and Kong, and it allows him a limited ability to fly, even though he doesn't really use it that much during the movie. Then because Godzilla had just taken down Kong and his heartbeat is slowing, they actually recharge him, so to speak, or revive him using the Hollow Earth craft to zap him with electricity, which is also a reference to the 1960s King Kong vs. Godzilla film, where they powered King Kong up with a big bolt of electricity. He winds up stopping Mechagodzilla right before he's able to land the killing blow on Godzilla. Then they sort of tag team him until Godzilla charges up the axe again, enabling Kong to land the killing blow on Mechagodzilla. They have a little bit of a final standoff, like a bro-off alpha moment. Like, they're not best buds or anything in this moment. It's more of like a truce. Like, okay, we're gonna go our separate ways. We both have our parts of the earth that we rule over. Then when they go their separate ways, that's meant to be a reference to the end of the 1960s King Kong vs. Godzilla movie, where they both sort of swim off in different directions. And even though we have that Hollow Earth scene at the end of the film, the true last scene of the film, you have that Godzilla roar. That's meant to be a reference to Godzilla's roar at the end of King Kong vs. Godzilla in the 1960s, meant to let you know that Godzilla survived their attack, because it's actually Kong that you see swimming off instead of Godzilla. But then after a short time jump, we learned that Monarch has created a new station down inside the Hollow Earth to study Kong, as well as the rest of the Hollow Earth in earnest. The whole thing with this Hollow Earth station scene is the director actually came out a little while ago and explained this was actually meant to be the original post-credit scene. They filmed it that way, but then at the last minute, they decided to just put it at the end of the film instead of in the post-credits, because they wanted whoever winds up making the sequel movie to have more flexibility in where the story picks up. So there is an actual post-credit scene for the movie, it's just that you're seeing it right here at the end of the movie instead of after the credits. Then over the actual credits you hear Godzilla's roar just to remind you, oh, he's still out there and he will come back. The whole idea with sequels though is that Legendary's license with Toho is up and they're kind of waiting to see how this film does financially. It sounds like it's doing really well, so I do think they will eventually renew that license and do more films. But the whole idea that sequels will probably revolve around what's happening down here in the Hollow Earth. They'll get into more mythology and the history of the Titans. But within the MonsterVerse, their sort of version of Avengers Infinity War, Avengers Endgame that they would build up to would be a version of Destroy All Monsters, which is sort of a battle royale with a whole bunch of Titans. Also, you have their version of Thanos, which would be like Destoroyah. You have other space kaiju, like Brian Tyree Henry's character tells Kyle Chandler's character, will you please come on my podcast and start talking about extraterrestrials? Remember, Ghidorah is also from outer space. They've already canonized that, so that means that other Titans also can come from outer space. So everybody let me know in the comments if you spotted any big Easter eggs in the movie that I didn't talk about during the video, and what you want them to do with the next sequel movie. There's a whole bunch of new trailers that drop, so I'll try to do videos for those as quick as possible. My full Falcon and Winter Soldier episode 4 video will also post on Friday, just like normal. While you wait for everything, click here for my other Godzilla vs. Kong ending and end credit scene video, and click here for my brand new Loki trailer and Marvel Easter eggs. Thank you so much for watching, everyone stay safe, and I'll see you guys tonight.